Okay, so as a home studio dude, how should you record your guitar? If you're plugging directly into the audio interface and it makes you feel less of a pro, should you invest time and money into buying and setting up amps and microphones? And if you're already setting up microphones, maybe you're wasting a bunch of time and money and pissing off neighbors for no audible increase in quality? And finally, maybe you are at the start of your recording journey and you want to know where your money should go. Amps, load boxes, or maybe microphones, plugins? And actually, do you need an amp at all? Well, luckily for you, I have already gone down all the three paths. I bumped my head on all the low ceilings, I hit my toes on all the cabinets and stepped on all the Lego bricks, and I will try to summarize it all in this video. I already kinda did it in my last video, but I only quickly duct taped together some sound samples, so this time we will record a proper solo for a proper song that I will not be ashamed to put on Spotify. We will use all the three approaches, go over the mixing process, and of course we will compare and rate them on a tier list. So maybe you will even learn something about mixing guitar solos, or maybe you will teach me something by leaving a comment. But first of all, I would like to thank all the people who subbed to my channel. I finally reached 1,000 subs and now I'm making like $9 per month, so I reached video streaming independence. My YouTube pays for my Netflix. Now I'm still a few bucks short to cover my Spotify subscription, so please still hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and call your mom to tell her about the channel. She will most probably not subscribe, but she'll be glad you called. And to celebrate 1,000 subs, I will answer all the questions in the comments to this video. So, any question goes, like music, money, legal advice, physics, world hunger, just post a question in the comments before I publish the next video. Subscribe to the channel and I hereby promise to answer it for free. It's like a deal of a lifetime. Okay, so back to this video. So it will be a little bit chaotic because I first recorded the mixing part live, but I had to re-record the narration, well now, due to my speech impediment of not being born in an English-speaking country. So it will be an exercise in non-linear storytelling. The original mixing screencast is down in the description if you want the full uncut version. And now back to recording guitar. So we will be recording guitar solo for our cover of Drive by The Cars, and the final mix of that song is also in the description if you want to see it. So we have three approaches: microphones, Loadbox, and plugins. But the solo is not exactly easy and I'm lazy, so I would rather record it only once. Also, to keep things fair, it's best to use the same take in all the sound samples, and that means that we have to get creative with the ways we connect stuff. So my guitar will be running through a DI box. The DI box will split the signals so that I can send dry guitar both to my audio interface and to my amp. Then I can just slap an amp sim plugin on the signal that goes to the audio interface and we have the amp sim covered. Now the amp. I'll be using a Fender Hot Rod with a Radial Tonebone Hot British Tube Distortion pedal up front. I dialed in the tone and turned off any compressor, delays and reverbs. It's better to record without those because they are easy to add in post and they are also easy to mess up. And if you mess them up, you can't exactly remove them or change the settings after they are recorded. So it's basically the same as with salt in cooking. Now my amp is connected to the Torpedo Captor and I just connect the dry output of the Captor to my audio interface using a TRS cable, and that covers the Captor part. Again, I'm skipping the Captor's built-in speaker sim. It's better to add speaker simulation in post. And of course my amp is mic'd up and my microphones are connected to my audio interface. This is pretty straightforward. And in case you are wondering how not to get lost with all the cables in the studio, here's a tip. Just buy colored cables. It saves you a lot of time. And they look so cute. And we're ready to record. So a few hours and one visit from some very friendly policeman later, we have a couple hundred takes of the solo recorded and I think the last one should be okay. Let's dive into mixing, but first let's lay some ground rules. First of all, only basic EQ, compression and reverb or delay are allowed. We want to keep this about the original sound rather than the FDA approved plugin pyramid. Second of all, to avoid polishing the turd forever, I will timebox myself to just 1 hour of mixing. So this video will be edited and shortened and I will put the link to the full uninterrupted editing video in the description. Now let's start with the microphones. This is by far the most expensive setup. Of course, the most expensive and the most important part of the setup is missing from that meme. It's actually the room. I recorded in my apartment and acoustically that's terrible but realistic. I don't think that you are planning to spend a few $1,000,000 on building a proper studio, and most probably you are not even likely to spend a few $1,000s on acoustic treatment. Now, the second most expensive piece of equipment, and also missing from that picture, is a guy who actually knows what he's doing, like where to put the microphone, what microphone to use, and even where to put the amp. It's an ancient mix of art, science, and batshit crazy superstition that generations of sound engineers accumulated by passing down from clone to clone since the records were invented, and it's really much harder than it looks. I'm using a very basic setup with cult classic Shure SM57 up close in a spot that one of those guys who knew what they were doing marked for me 15 years ago, and an Octava condenser microphone a bit further away to capture some air. Let's give it a listen. So first of all, it sounds like crap, but that's more or less the way it should sound. A lot of people think that guitar should sound epic from the beginning, and they just immediately slap way too much chorus, reverb and delay. Now this is plain wrong, and it's a highway to a crappy, muddy mix with all the instruments just trying to one-up each other. Guitar is just a piece of the puzzle, and it should actually serve the song and it should serve the mix, just like all the other instruments. If anything is the most important part of the mix, it's the vocals. People don't want to listen to guitar, they would rather listen to the singer, just get over it. Now we will put some makeup on this pick later, but let's start by adding some overdubs. Most guitars you have heard in your life in the records are overdubbed, to make them sound bigger. The easiest way to add an overdub is just to select your second best take, in my case it will be the one before the last, and just bring the volume way down. Now let's pan some shit around. Adjust the levels, making sure that the mix stays balanced between left and right. This is a point where we could spend a lot of time trying to find the right balance between the two microphones, and this can become a nightmare, but we are time-boxed here, and it already sounds much better, so let's just leave it like that. Now I will create a submix by sending all those tracks to a group channel. I will slap on my favorite Voxengo Crunchosaur, make sure it's pumping, and set up some EQ. Okay, and that's okay-ish enough, and we are on a clock here, so let's just add some reverb and delay. Now, one of the goals of reverb is to glue the mix together, make it sound like all the instruments are in the same room. Because of that, and also because I use a DSP reverb that's built into my audio interface, and I have just 2 instances of that plugin available, I will send the guitar to the same reverb effects channel as the vocals. Next, I will just add some slight stereo delay, so actually it's 2 delays. Let's set up an 8th note for some straight rhythm and a 4th triplet to break it up a little bit. Okay, and I think that's it. Keep in mind that it's not mastered, so it will sound very differently across different speakers and headphones. And if there's a frequency spike that overlaps with a frequency spike in your speaker characteristics, it may be really bad. But as for ground rules, we are leaving it here. Okay, so let's move beyond microphones. This is where, like in theory, I could start recording silently. With Captor I can disconnect the amp speaker, and with DI and plugins I don't need an amp at all. But this would come at a cost. One of the hottest debates about guitar tone on YouTube is if the sound coming from the amp actually affects the tone of the guitar. Many people have done videos about that, and usually they come to the conclusion that it does not, but there is one exception. How does he get that sustain? The answer is simple: feedback. It's the sound from the amp that is loud enough to actually move the guitar body and sustain the string vibration. Now, if you are wondering where did I find this diagram, I got it from Sustainiac website. Now, guys at Sustainiac, 1995 called and they want your website back. for the love of God, Joe Satriani and even that girl with weird smile and a snake tattoo on her leg is using your stuff, so guys, just man up, get a new website. Now, feedback is fun, and if you are lucky, you may even learn how to control it before you go dev. You can get feedback with plugins, but you still need to be physically loud. Louder than most studio monitors can handle. There are effects to simulate feedback, but they are shit. And there's also sustain and evo, but they are just different. I'm using feedback for sustain here, so we will be cheating in favor of Captor and plugins, but just a little bit. So let's start with Torpedo Captor. I did a full review of this baby and you can find it here. First, let's listen to it dry. And of course it sounds even more crap than the microphones. It has no speaker sim on. Let's add it. So because of a bug in Torpedo Wall of Sound, I will have to move it back to a stereo track and we are ready to slap on the IRs, which is just fancy speak for speaker simulation. This is where we could spend 2 hours playing around, choosing different speaker cabinets and setting them up, but that's not how I like to do it. First of all, it creates another point where you just get too many choices and risk falling down the tweaker rabbit hole. Second of all, when recording and setting up the tone, I just listen to my amp. And I want the recording to sound as close as possible to that. So I just found an IR that's most similar to my amp. I created a preset and I will just keep on using that one until I die. Or change the amp. So let's listen to it with and without the speaker sim. And yep, it sounds completely different. Now, just like with the microphones, let's create an overdub from another take, cut the volume, pan it and send everything to a group channel and add compression. It sounds a bit flat, so I'll create an empty EQ and create a frequency boost and move it around to find what's missing. Let's just find some sparkle somewhere in the high mids. Now for reverb and delay, I'll just reuse what I did for the microphones. Those are the same takes and again, we are lazy and time boxed, so let's just don't overcomplicate things. And okay, so it took much less effort and time, and unlike the microphones, it's not over the top. The microphone sounded like a 15-year-old me would set up my guitar. Maybe the Captor is a little bit too flat, but I think I should be able to play around with EQ and multiband compression later to add some pop. But that's okay for now. Let's move to plugins. Okay, so first let's listen to it dry. Yeah, well, what did you expect? Now I really want to hear this part. Oh man, I'm not going to Carnegie Hall anytime soon. Now, with plugins, the problem is, well, too many plugins. Let's try a couple of them, starting with a very old Native Instruments guitar rig. Let's start with Steven Weiss for the Love of God preset, because why would I aim low? And it's okay, but it's not great. I tried getting a better sound out of the bias and failed, so let's download a trial version of IK Amplitube and let's go with November Rain. That's better than the Native Instruments, so let's stay with this one. Let's just drop the reverb and delay, we have those at home already. At this point, I bought the full version of Amplitube. You know, it's an Italian company and I don't need cement shoes or broken legs, especially if they find out I used to put pineapple on my pizza. But while their plugins are great, Their website is just a notch better than the Sustainiac website. And the licensing software is a pain in the butt to set up, and also it didn't start working until the next day. So you will be hearing the noise that the free version emits to kindly remind you to buy it. Now back to the mixing. So as usually we add overdubs from another take, pan and level. Now we could go fancy here and use a different plugin for the overdub. Or actually create a poor man's overdub by using the same take with a different plugin. Sometimes using a different plugin for overdubs works better, but sometimes it just makes things more muddy and confusing. And we have a pretty quick section towards the end of the solo, so it's better to keep things very crisp. Let's just stick to the same plugin and same setup for the overdub as well. Okay, that sounds good. Now, as usually, let's add a group channel, crunchessor, and play around with EQ. And again, let's use the same reverb and delay setup. And it sounds really good, very impressive. Of course, recording with just the plugin we wouldn't get the feedback-based sustain, but come on, you don't really need it that often. Now let's see how the three compare to each other and let's rate them. So, in my opinion, here's how the barely processed tracks rank. Captor is the most bland. Dry, not interesting, and there's no pop. This is not necessarily bad, it may be actually good, especially for rhythm guitar, so I put it in C tier. Microphones are a little bit slightly over the top. And when I say a little bit slightly, I mean really fucking lot. Now, this could be fixed later with some more EQ and or multiband compression, but now is now. So I give it also a C. The best sound? Amplitube. Maybe it sounds a little bit artificial, but it's not a blind test, so I may be biased. Even though I used Amplitube, I didn't use bias in the end. So this would be a B. Now, none of them did, as we say in my country, tear my ass off with an out-of-the-box killer sound. So now I'll spend a few days finishing up the mix and I will share the final results with you in a second.
Several months later.
So after a few weeks of tweaking the mix, leveling stuff out, reticulating splines and mastering, I ended up not even using the microphone sounds. Only Captor and Amplitube for the primary take, plus Amplitube for the overdub. I guess we can call it a mic drop. The microphones were just too out there and they were a pain in the butt to mix, and their sound didn't translate well between different types of speakers. And that's not really strange given that I recorded them halfway between my desk and my kitchen. The problem with the microphones is that in order to get even a half decent sound, you have to jump through many hoops. From the right room acoustics via microphone placement to a lot of tweaking in the mix. And it's not only electric guitar. Sometimes I think the only instrument that's actually easy to record with microphones is vocals. Not to mention that the microphones themselves are pretty expensive and everything you record is set in stone. With DI you can basically tweak everything, and with Captor you can at least tweak, well, the virtual microphones when mixing. And if you say, pros don't need to tweak after they are done recording, well, why did they invent reamping then? So finally I would like to move home recorded microphones to D tier and the rest stays as it is. It seems like the microphones are actually just not worth the effort in a home setting. So with plugins at the top, do you actually still need an amp? Neil deGrasse Tyson once said that when electric self-driving cars take over, people will still drive their old-fashioned gasoline cars just for fun, just like horses today. And I think this is where we are getting with the amps today. Those old-fashioned, messy, impractical things that still have their charm. And what is that charm? Well, let me ask you a tricky question. Have you actually heard my amp? Well, no, you have not. You have heard the sound of your speakers or headphones, playing whatever I recorded using my microphones and processed using my DAW. It's not actually a sound of a 12-inch speaker moving the air. In real life it's much louder, and because of that it has way more dynamics. And it being loud actually affects the way I play, and it forces me to be more expressive when I play live. And playing it is a physical experience. You can literally feel the sound. It's like a V8 compared to a Tesla. You know, even the act of turning on a tube amp is like starting a classic car. You get into the garage, you turn the key and you wait for the engine to start and bring that smile on your face. Of course, until you realize that it's just a 14-year-old Buick and the check engine light is on again. Okay, and that's it for today. So please subscribe, like the video, leave a comment if you want any question answered. If you have no questions, that's fine, just go away, sure. And yeah, don't forget to rewind the video when you return it, because I heard that YouTube just introduced a penalty for that. Okay,